So obviously thanks everybody for listening and joining today. I thought it was important, given the unusual circumstances that we find ourselves in, that we have a look at how we can effectively manage staff remotely, because I think, you know, now more than ever, it's probably more important to make sure that we are managing staff and keeping in touch with everybody, because we've got no idea, you know, from not seeing people physically in the office, how they're coping. So I just want to go through some things that'll be maybe some good tips for you. And if you've got any questions at the end, just let me know and we can talk through them. So we start by going through today's agenda. So we're going to discuss communication, keeping in touch meetings, also known as KIT meetings, one-to-ones, appraisals, and then performance management and monitoring. So if we speak about communication first, I think the things that we need to really consider is the fact that now more than ever, it's absolutely critical as we do try to adjust to our new way of working. While communicating remotely comes with its challenges, I think finding an approach that works for your particular business is crucial to achieving productivity and supporting those employees. I think before today, remote working was really only truly embraced by a minority of businesses. But as we have now all been forced to accept these flexible working arrangements, I think it's important that we do learn to adapt and make the most of what technology particularly can offer us during this time. So some of the things to consider are frequent team meetings, continuing with the normal operational meetings. So that's obviously important for those of us that are still working. I think keeping that normality, whether if you have regular, I don't know, finance meetings or ops meetings, I think really it's important that those are kept going, because what you don't want is everything to sort of dwindle off for the next few weeks or however long this lasts, and then us having to come back and sort of start over again. Check-in meetings, so I think they're really important to make sure that everybody is doing okay. There'll probably be a lot of people actually who might be on their own and feeling very isolated during this time, so I think it's important that we keep in touch with them. Some of the methods, I think we discussed this earlier, Microsoft Teams. That's obviously something that you can rely on. It allows you to set up a group chat function, which acts like a WhatsApp group and can be used on your phone or your desktop. It also gives you the opportunity to host conference calls and video conferences with your contacts. Zoom meetings, I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with this now. This can be used for video and conference calls, and it also has the function, as you can see here, of screen sharing. So you and your reports could maybe view and discuss things together if you want to look at the same document. And then, of course, the phone. I think scheduling normal telephone calls is also just still as useful as ever in us connecting and keeping connected. So I think we can all reflect about how many times we've probably sent an email and actually we could just add that personable touch by just picking up the phone instead. So KIT meetings, keeping in touch meetings, I think these are some things that some managers decide to do regularly, because some people may not have geographically much close contact with their employees anyway. Although many of us, I think, don't see the need for keeping in touch meetings when we do share an office, as it's likely that we are so close to our reports, it can almost seem a bit pointless, I guess, to have a catch up. However, even in the office, I think this is still something that I really encourage managers to do, as I believe it gives employees a private platform to raise anything that they may otherwise feel uneasy approaching you about. And I think that's something that we take for granted if we are geographically close to people. We may not ask them privately how they are or how things are going, because I suppose we just assume that we already know. So I think during this time, this lockdown, that's probably a great time to maybe start doing these keeping in touch meetings and then keeping them up when you get back. I think also sometimes asking someone directly how they are can reveal more than we expect. And the KIT meetings are distinct from one-to-ones, as they should focus more on the employee and their well-being rather than address performance issues or other concerns. So I know a lot of you may have regular meetings with your staff to talk about where they're up to with work and to check on progress, but I think having these little sort of in-between keeping in touch meetings just to check how they are generally is really good for well-being. So if you think about some of the things that you may want to ask at these meetings, I think my advice is to keep them very fluid. I wouldn't really put too much structure into them. I think you just ask maybe simple questions. So how are you? How are you feeling in the unusual circumstances? Is there anything we can support you further with? And how is home working for you? Because, you know, some people may be finding this really difficult. I think for some of us who have flexible working anyway and maybe work from home or work from other offices regularly, it's probably nothing new. But I think for some people who this may be completely alien to, they may be struggling. So I think it's always nice for managers to just reach out and just ask how it's working. A few other things to consider, I would say, would be the frequency. So I'd recommend for these either weekly or bi-weekly, or just at intervals that are mutually agreeable to you both. You may find that some staff during this time need more frequent communication, particularly if they are, you know, maybe living alone, to support them during this time because they may be feeling quite isolated. In terms of duration, I think how long these meetings last is obviously variable depending on what's discussed and how the discussion develops. But I would recommend blocking out, you know, at least an hour of your diary just in case, you know, something is revealed to you, and the conversation develops, because I think the sentiment would really be lost if your employee feels rushed or gets the impression that you don't really have much time to listen. So I think that's really important. So if you look at one-to-ones, I think the importance of one-to-one meetings really can't be lost during this pandemic, and the effective management of your reports during this time will ultimately determine productivity levels. The one-to-one meetings will help provide some structure and direction to employees in what is a very obviously unsettling and confusing time. And I think furthermore, the impact of a sudden loss of routine and physical presence of a manager on an individual's ability to stay focused shouldn't be underestimated. I think it's really, you know, it's really something, a shock to a lot of people, and that change in direction, change in physical environment and change in ways of working could really knock somebody's focus, and some people do need that structure. So I think things to consider within the one-to-one could include an outline of the performance expectations. So does the employee know what is expected of them and in what time frames? So I think you need to consider, will the way that work is usually delegated change? And if so, how? Because they'll need to be aware of that. Discuss any support and training required. So the training needs and other support should be addressed even during this time, as those needs of the individual are still something that as a manager we need to identify and support with, because, you know, the last thing that you want is performance to suffer or well-being during this time because you haven't really offered any support because you're not physically present. Explain and brief on any changes in direction. So some employees may have been asked to undertake some slightly different duties to support the different needs of the business during this time. I know I've had a couple of clients who have came forward and said, you know, typically this is the work that they carry out. However, you know, to retain their employment during this time, what we've decided is they can actually help with this part of the business, which we've been putting off for a while. So we expect them to do that. And I've had mixed reviews, really. Some employees have took that absolutely fine and cracked on with it. And then other employees have struggled, and that's subsequently led to them reporting that they're feeling quite anxious and stressed because they may not have the skills or the support or the direction to do that work. So I think it's really important to bear that in mind when you are delegating work. If there's anything that's changed or there's a task that usually you're quite maybe supportive in a hands-on approach with, you still identify that and see how you can support them. Monitor progress. So obviously the monitoring the progress in the one-to-ones is a great way to check on work, achievement of objectives and all the KPIs. So I think this is an important time for you to assess, is the employee on track? Are they achieving the objectives set out for them? I think it seems for a lot of people this time is quite chaotic. So I think if, like I say, you're used to that physical presence of seeing whether people are working or whether they're on track with things, and you can just pop in and ask them how things are getting on and they're producing stuff, you know, in front of you. I think having this remote working makes you sort of perhaps wonder how progress is getting on, because it's not so obvious. So I think it's really important that in these one-to-ones, you do discuss the progress, so that you don't return to work and then somebody says, oh yeah, you know, I've been at home for the past 6 weeks and actually I haven't achieved anything that we'd planned to, because then that will obviously lead to performance issues that could have potentially been avoided. Okay, so we go back to where we were. Yeah, so addressing any performance shortcomings. So obviously this is a good opportunity, like I say, for you to address those now, and highlight any improvements that are required at this stage, rather than it being later down the line where potentially, you know, you could have an influx of people who come back to work and say, oh no, I didn't do any of that because I wasn't aware that that's what I was supposed to be doing, or I didn't realise I wasn't on track. So rather than have that backlog of issues to sort through, I think keeping the one-to-ones going during this lockdown will prove critical to that. So in terms of appraisals, I think while these times are both unusual and unprecedented, I think we obviously all hope soon to be back to normal, and hopefully that is getting closer. So I think keeping up with the formal appraisals as planned will stop the need for us having to start this from scratch again, and ultimately undo all of the work and effort that has gone into developing and implementing these systems. I know some people will have either annual appraisals or bi-monthly, 6 monthly appraisals biannual. So I think if you've already got a date set in for them and it happens to come over this lockdown period, I would recommend still going ahead with them, just because, you know, obviously we'll talk through the benefits of having these appraisals, but I think ultimately a lot of people build themselves up for appraisals and are really looking forward to having them to get things off the chest, or to talk about what the future holds for them, or to talk about any issues that they're having with the work or management or whatever. And I think if that is scheduled to take place soon, you never know whether they have been sort of building themselves up to that. So I would recommend that you, where you can, if you can do them remotely, it would be beneficial. So if we look at the importance of the appraisals and what we can achieve through them, I think the first step would be to reflect on the progress and development since the last appraisal. So just as you normally would, really look, you know, back 6 months or back a year to see where people have where they've come along, whether they've met the objectives that they set for themselves. And I think if you haven't already implemented an appraisal system, maybe now, you know, while we have potentially a little bit more time on our hands, maybe this is a good time for you to start them, because it's a good time for you to really have them conversations with your staff. Assess the achievement of the department and the individual objectives. So see whether everybody's on track. Is the department achieving everything that it set out to do at the start of the year or the start of the 6 month period? Individual objectives, if they've been set or if you plan to set them, identify what they are and how the individual's getting on with achieving them. Identify any areas for development. So this isn't necessarily performance shortcomings, it's more about where you potentially see something, a good attribute in the employee that you want to develop on, or whether there's something that they could do better which would help with their overall job performance. Look to the future, you know, where next, where's this going, what is the plan for the department, for the business for the next 6 months or the next year, and where does that employee fit into that? I think that's probably for an employee one of the most useful things about an appraisal for people who do have their eyes set on the next goal, or maybe promotion or achieving something else in the career. I think an appraisal is a great time for you to sort of harbour that interest and see where that will go and how you can support them to get there. In terms of how to complete the appraisal, I think set the date. So like I say, if you've got the date already set, you know, think about sticking to it, or set the date now within the next couple of weeks. I think it would be really good probably for motivation and to keep people focused. Ask the employee to complete the feedback form 5 days before the date. So we have some of you may use your own appraisal systems, but we have one which obviously I can share with you, where you would send out the feedback form to the employees and ask them to complete it and hand back to you before the date of the appraisal, and then you can review that, and it's their opportunity as well to reflect themselves, which will be the discussion points for the appraisal. And then you could maybe host a Zoom meeting or a call in place of the physical meeting, I think what we've all noticed is that the Zoom meetings and the Microsoft Teams conference calls, you know, they're just as useful as meeting face to face. I think especially if you have the camera on, it just seems like you know, sat opposite somebody. So I think I wouldn't be too put off by the fact that this is now a remote way of working. I think, you know, as much as we can, we sort of still can carry on. So thank you for joining today's webinar. I hope you found it useful, and I hope, you know, you've taken some hints and tips from it, and obviously we can share this slide with you. Does anybody have any questions? No?
No, I don't think so. That's fine, Lauren, thank you.
Okay, perfect. Well, obviously you can get in touch anytime if you do have any questions, and we will send out a copy of the slides, just because obviously I know that you've missed a few of them. And if anybody does need any help with setting up the one-to-one meetings or the kit meetings, or even developing an appraisal system, obviously we're here. So just get in touch.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lauren. Thank you.
Thank you. Speak to you soon.
Thanks
very much.
Bye.
Bye.